So hello everyone. Happy to be presenting for Teams Fest today. I know this has been done a couple of times within the community and I wasn't able to get on the last one, but I'm very, very happy to be presenting to you today on using Microsoft Teams for adult learning. And so my name is Liz Sundet, as I was already introduced. I happen to be a program manager for Microsoft, and I recently joined the product group as of this week, actually. Joined the OneDrive and SharePoint product group as a core team member. But I'm also an adjunct instructor for a small technical college that's located in Rochester, Minnesota. Short drive from where I live. So this case study actually came out of my work as an adjunct instructor rather than my work with Microsoft. So a little bit about me. I love to travel. I have done conferences pretty much all over the United States as well as in Europe. And the picture of me with the pipe organ in the background happens to be in Haarlem, Netherlands, and it's one of my favorite places. I got to present in the organ room a couple of times. So as a musician, it just kind of met both worlds in terms of speaking and presenting on SharePoint as well as my music background. So also have a little boxer named Deuce who is running around the house. He's probably right outside my door right now, you know, kind of wanting to peek in because he hears me talking and all that type of stuff. And I also do a lot of great work with Women in SharePoint as well. So if you want to follow the group for Women in SharePoint, we're active on Twitter, Facebook, all of those types of social platforms as well. All right. So please feel free to rate my session when we're done here. You know, QR code, I will show this on the back end as well. And also use the Teams Fest hashtag when posting items to Twitter as well. I know there's been some great tie graph, you know, Power BI types of things that we've gotten back already from using the Teams Fest. So great to have you here, and please rate the session when you're done. All right, so we're going to jump right in, and this is really a case study. And with any case study, it is really just a personal story of what happened, some of the background, some of the problems that we encountered, and why we chose this particular way of using Microsoft Teams. The result always very, very important for us for learning and growing and developing what's kind of the next phase of that. And so we'll be talking about future improvements as well, and then a little inspiration for everyone who's wanting to do this at the very end. I know I was inspired, so hopefully everyone will be inspired as well on some of the little inspiration video that I have for you. All right, so a little bit of the background. RCTC, that's Rochester Community and Technical College, they have had a course since 2000 that is really designed for prepping those students to be able to pass the PMP exam from the Project Management Institute. The addition of a self-paced course was added in about 2015. And then in 2019, we took a little bit of a different approach and decided that we would use part of the online learning as well as some in-classroom activities. And the majority of those students are from Mayo Clinic. And Mayo Clinic is home in Rochester, Minnesota, and Mayo Clinic is known around the world. So this is really just, you know, what we've done in terms of training those employees for Mayo Clinic. So the hybrid course was really an idea that we wanted to try out, and it was an experiment that we tried out to have this online course materials being utilized, as well as those in-classroom activities. And those in-classroom activities involved a lot of small group activities, a lot more questions that we could use to prepare our students. And then we used innovation games. And so you'll see in the pictures here where the students are actually building bridges out of newspaper and tape. And so it's one of those innovation games that allows them to get hands-on in a time-boxed project that they would be doing for really understanding what goes into an entire project over the life cycle of a project, but in a very, very short period of time. And so we ran a couple of these innovation games just to get their learning a little bit more enhanced and that type of thing. But with that hybrid type of course, we encountered some problems. And one of the problems that we encountered was, how do we share some of the materials that were presented during the classroom, whether it was a setup to the innovation games that they were playing or some of those additional questions that they had? How do we share those decks that we as instructors and presenters had, but the students didn't necessarily have access to? We already had an LMS system that was set for all of the online modules, but we couldn't necessarily just post additional decks out to that LMS system because it was designed in a online learning and already had a lot of decks and materials as well as questions and that type of thing in it already. So we couldn't use that system, but what other systems do we use? So we talked with the class on one of the first nights and we said, hey, there's a few ideas here. We can use email. Everybody kind of went, boo, no, we don't really want to use email. We could use SharePoint. Mayo Clinic didn't really like SharePoint, believe it or not. We could use Dropbox. We could use something called Teams. And Teams gives us the ability to be able to have communications as well as the file in there. And so eventually we chose Microsoft Teams, which is awesome in and of itself, but we immediately encountered another problem as soon as we decided on using Microsoft Teams. And that was that the students had zero idea, zero knowledge of Microsoft Teams, had no idea how to log in, had no idea what it was, what the architecture was, how to use it, any of those types of things. And because this class wasn't designed to teach technology, it was designed to teach the students how to pass the PMP exam, we didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on the technology and talking about the technology. We wanted it to be very simple, easy to get to, and work with it that way. And so we decided to use Microsoft Teams at this point, but I would also call this at the point of which we were experimenting. I said, let's just try it. We'll use it for a little bit of time. And if it doesn't work, we can try something else. Be very agile about what we are working with. And so enter the experiment phase. And the first thing that I wanted to make sure of in terms of the experiment phase was to really keep it simple. We applied the KISS method, or keep it super simple method. We set up Microsoft Teams, but we set it up in a very, very simple construct. I didn't use many channels for the different subject areas. In fact, I only used one channel for the subject area, and that was just the general channel. Sent them all invites. The college and university allows guest access, so I sent them all invites to their Mayo Clinic email address with the login information, as well as how to, get into Microsoft Teams and a little bit of, just training during the class on how to navigate Microsoft Teams and what they were going to see. And so what we I've redacted the names of some of the students and that type of thing just for privacy reasons. But you'll see it's a very, very simple setup. We just used a general channel. And this was to keep it very simple, keep it able to find different pieces of information, and then also keep the channel messages very, very simple, and working with how they were going to be able to use the channel messages. And they were a little apprehensive, a little bit scared at first to be able to post some of these things. But, first phase of our experiment was really tackling that number one problem is, how do we enter our files, or how do we get to those files? And so all of those files for each of the sessions that we did during the class were put out onto the general files area. And so easy to find, easy to navigate. We didn't have any separate folders under here or anything like that. It was all of the material was right there. And when we would get done with the class, the next thing was to upload the presentation for that class. All right. And then about halfway through, we decided that, we really need to improve some of our engagement. And so I started posting different questions that were either asked during the classroom activities or during the testing or questions from the tests that they had taken online, and would post answers, explanations, a little bit more information, maybe additional links. And then, also posted the slides into that question answer area right within the chat so that people could ask those different questions. People could engage a little bit more because they weren't really engaging much in the chat. And I wanted them to kind of engage a little bit more in the chat. And so we did things like, question of the day, where I would pull a question from the webs and just find a question that was related to some of the topics that we had covered in the last class and post the questions so that they could answer, as well as, their thought process around what those questions were. So trying to get a little bit more engagement, even though we weren't in the classroom during the rest of that week. Overall, the experiment results, yeah, they were pretty good. About halfway through the class, I actually had somebody in the class say, hey, you know what, Liz, the SharePoint thing, I'm glad you didn't pick SharePoint because, we at Mayo Clinic we're like, we don't really care for SharePoint. There's so many different ways of getting into it, and I can never find anything, and search doesn't work for us, and all of that type of stuff. But this Microsoft Teams thing, this is awesome. This is working really, really well for us. And I said, well, do you know that Microsoft Teams, where you go to get your files, that's actually a SharePoint site? They had no idea that it was actually backed by SharePoint, something that they were, very, very negative about. And yet, working with it in this Teams construct, it was just a different look and feel for what they were, really intending from kind of, their background of working with SharePoint, and, Teams worked really well for them. And so we even had people engaging after the class was over. So our class ended the end of May, and people were engaging after that. June, July, there was people that were saying, hey, I just took the test, I passed it. Here was my experience in taking the test at that particular test center. And so it was one of those things where we had a lot more engagement after we started posting like the question of the day, and people were starting to really get into the groove of not only using Microsoft Teams, but this whole hybrid construct of the class. And so it was all about, really helping each other out at that point and posting different sources of information for maybe online full tests that they could run that were outside of the class, or little quick cards that they had found, that they had apps on their phone where they could go through test cards as they were preparing for the PMP class. So great engagement overall, but always room for improvements as well. So when I think about future improvements, it was really, how do we design the class maybe a little bit different? And then welcome to 2020. COVID hit. And so we were preparing to do a fall of 2020 class and had to kind of start rethinking, hey, this might be a remote only class. The course might be still planned, but we have to rethink how we're going to do everything, because we're not going to be able to have that in-person experience along with the online course. So no more hybrid, it was online only, but yet how do we do that and still get interaction, still get some of the same results that we were hoping for. And so the instructors had a session on really talking about how do we do this? How do we do this remote thing with COVID? And we were talking about what was the technology that we were going to use. Were we going to use Zoom? Were we going to use, WebEx? Were we going to use something else? And I said, no, it's going to be Teams. And they were like, why are you so adamant on Teams? I know you work for Microsoft, Liz, but why are you so adamant on using Teams? And I said, because Teams allows us to have those different meetings right within the Teams construct. We can use things like breakout rooms, which for education licenses, we're able to use breakout rooms, or just set up different channel meetings and be able to have those small group activities. And we can rethink how we did some of those innovation games. Maybe not do, the build a bridge, but some of those other types of activities that we can do still online. We just have to rethink about them just a little bit different. We can use video, we can use Microsoft Stream, we can record all of our sessions. So even if they would miss a session, they still have the recording to go back to. We can use things like OneNote or Whiteboard to be able to really take kind of those virtual notes, or what we would put as instructors on a whiteboard, put them into OneNote or put them into a whiteboard that's attached directly in Microsoft Teams. And then we could set up different channels for all those different topics. That would be one thing that I would change from the experiment, would be to have those different channels for all of those different topics. We could ask questions, we could pull resources from outside the classroom information, and then really start picking up on what we needed to improve was really that engagement. Yeah, the question of the day worked really, really well, but I wanted to be able to improve that engagement overall within a technology that was still very, very simple for that classroom. It wasn't about the technology, it was about passing the PMP exam, but using that technology to be able to move the engagement forward. So the engagement was still something that we wanted to make improvements on, and we talked about things like, hey, maybe it's the students that can present to the rest of the class on those different subject areas, or make a small group activity while they're working in the class and almost become the instructor, because you learn more, you retain more when you actually teach a subject area. So how do they look at improving that engagement? What are the questions that they want to have to be able to improve that engagement as well? All right, so any questions so far? Paul, any questions from the...
No, we look okay at the minute. There's no questions coming to the chat just yet.
All right, not a problem. All right, so, unfortunately, we didn't get to run the class this year simply because COVID, and a lot of the Mayo Clinic students that we would normally have as students in that particular classroom, they cut their budget, laid off a lot of employees, furloughed quite a few of employees. So we had to postpone that class. The online portion of the class is still running and still has people in that class, but it doesn't mean that we won't have to, have this class offering in the future. And so all of those things that we've done in terms of working with the planning around that class and how we do it online is not going to be for nothing. We will likely have to be doing that in the future. And so then after the class got over, I found a piece of really, really great inspiration from a person named Dr. David Kellerman. And there is a video on YouTube that I'm just going to play here very quickly. It is a Microsoft produced video, so it's got some really great ideas on how to evolve and use it for the classroom. That was really my source of inspiration, and wanted to make sure that everybody was able to see this and talk about it and that type of thing. So.
UNSW Engineering is the largest engineering faculty in Australia. We have about 17,000 students and we're producing about 30% of Australia's engineers. With that comes the responsibility of delivering a really fantastic learning experience for the students. When I first introduced Teams, I was really trying to get my students to communicate with each other more frequently and to get a better interaction between them and their tutors and demonstrators. Teams is basically a communication platform. There's a different channel for every topic that we go throughout the semester, and that's really the communication hub.
Sometimes if you wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes, students start popping in answering questions on their own. And really the best way to learn is for students to help out other students, because that means they understand the content so much more.
Whenever I'm stuck on a question, I know that there's always an answer to be found on Teams.
After 3 weeks, the number of posts was about 900% of what it had been the previous year. The way I'm using it in teaching is delivering course material, lecture material.
I can sit there and listen to him and not need to worry about writing down every little thing he says.
I don't use a blackboard or a whiteboard anymore. I use digital ink. That gets synchronized to the student's own notebook and it's a click away on that Teams environment.
I can really think about what he's trying to say instead of trying to rote learn.
Live streaming of videos to help students who aren't on campus engage and interact with the lectures.
I don't have to think as hard about how I'm going to find the answers and panic about missing a lecture because I know that I can always find the content.
We're actually one big learning community. We're one team all working towards a common goal, which is everybody gaining competency, learning, and Teams is definitely an integral part of that.
So 900% engagement year over year. I'm absolutely amazed by that type of a metric. Hopefully, when we get to do this class in the future, I'll be able to really think about how we do more engagement, how we do more communications, and really up that number from when we did it in the spring of 2019. So that is really the end of my session. I know I went through this all quite quickly, but let me know if you have any questions. I've got lots of time to take some of those questions right now.
Brilliant case study there, Liz. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. I know I've seen the Dr. Kellerman stuff before, and the things he's done there are phenomenal. And the way he's got teams across his institution and such is just a great thing that he's done there. And it's not just the use of Teams; it's the way it's just grown. It's not just Teams as an application they've used, is it? They've grown it out, and they're now doing more and more with the Microsoft products and Teams on a whole.
Yeah, and I can't wait. You know, I know breakout rooms is rolling out for enterprise, and about the only thing I would say about breakout rooms is that it doesn't have that continuous stream of, you know, communications. You know, you're basically in a whole nother meeting room. So if you're wanting that, you know, never-ending stream of conscious thoughts within a channel, it doesn't work quite like a channel. It works just a little bit different. It works more like a meeting room where you kind of lose some of that ability to have that chat, you know, in the future. So just be kind of aware of that. If you're wanting that, you know, continuous chat, then maybe set up another channel for that breakout room and just have that meet now within that channel kind of thing. So. All right, was there I'm in EDU and haven't found breakout rooms yet. So breakout rooms for EDU was installed at one point in time, and then it was pulled back, and then they wanted to kind of redo it for everyone. So it was maybe just a preview that I had access to, but it will be rolling out to pretty much everyone, not only EDU clients, but as well as enterprise clients as well. So should be rolling out. It was supposed to roll out by, I think, the end of this month. So.
Yeah, the news I've heard as well is it should be by the end of October. Everyone should hopefully have it. I know I'm very excited for breakout rooms. In on one of the previous sessions, someone mentioned about there's a Microsoft Teams Education Facebook group, and all you see is people on there just constantly, when's it coming, when's it coming? It's like one of the most anticipated things in education.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of things that I would love to see in education, clients or education tenants, or just even in the overall Teams tenant, like, metrics on how many people clicked open, a particular document or a particular file. So those are requested items as well. But, again, Teams is quite young, still making improvements, but, we'll get there eventually. So.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah. I mean,
questions.
Yeah. Has anyone got any questions for Liz? Please feel free, if you want to come off mute, raise your hand, and I can enable you to speak. Doesn't look like it at the minute. And one thing I was just going to say about Teams that I'm sure you agree, Liz, is that it is evolving so quickly. If we look at back at March and how the uptake of Teams like exploded, really, not just in education, but across the world. And the things that I think Microsoft have put in place so quickly was amazing at the beginning there, from having the amount of users. What was it? It was like 200% uptake, wasn't it? Something like that in 1 week, I think one of the stats were. And it's just a crazy amount of extra people on board.
It definitely was. I think COVID had a lot to do with that, just simply because people were working from home. What do we use for technology and that type of thing? And, knowing that some of the other items that were out there, maybe weren't quite as secure. Yes, there's a license issue. You have to be licensed, and all that type of thing with using Microsoft Teams, but a lot of people had it already. It just sped up, the planning for the deployments and the rollouts for Microsoft Teams, at least, back in March. But I actually didn't know this until I joined the product group, was that Microsoft Teams is actually #1 in use for education. And I know that they've been doing a lot with, using different platforms, not only for, the younger kids, but also for adults. I know for the entire state of Minnesota, they've already got Teams enabled. They've got guest access to be able to join for that. So it was one of those things that, it's already there. Why not take advantage of using it? And I think, people talking about it and people using it and people getting used to it. And honestly, like after the whole experiment that we did with the Mayo Clinic students, it really gave them a leg up on, using Microsoft Teams as well, because I know that earlier this year they deployed Microsoft Teams, and all of those people that were students in that class already knew how to use Microsoft Teams in a very simple format because of the class. So they got, almost a year of being able to be exposed to that before Mayo Clinic started using it and, really started rolling with it. So, those students kind of were a pilot group in and of themselves, even for Mayo Clinic. So.
Brilliant stuff. Does anyone have any questions for Liz at all? I've just posted in the feedback form in the chat, so please do fill that out for us. That would be fantastic if you could, but because it just shows the greatness of feedback and how we can improve it and get better as time goes on, and see how well we've done. Because I mean, I really enjoyed that session, Liz. So I'm sure everyone is gonna be likewise as well.
I did cut some stuff out just for a matter of time, because I know we only had 30 to 45 minutes here. So, but any questions? I'm happy to take anything else.
Brilliant. Looks like we've got a quiet bunch today on the question front.
It's towards the end of the day for you, isn't it?
We've got
people
a few
are
more
like
sessions,
overloaded, I'm sure.
Well, that was a really good session, Liz. So thank you very much.
You.
Will you be going to the lounge at all, or if I could?
Yeah, I can hang out there for a while. Absolutely.
Yep. So I'll post that link up in the chat. So if anyone does have any questions, they can speak to you in there. So I'll post that in the chat. So if anyone does have any questions for Liz, she will be in there. Although my chat is just there we go. Sorry to break, it's gone. There we go. So I posted that in the chat. So Liz will be there if you do want to go and ask us some questions. But thank you very much, Liz, for a great session.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a great Teams Day.
Thank you.